How Eamon Met Kaidan, Chapter 14, Greywatch House, Winterhold. Sundas, the 26th of Evening Star, in the 201st year of the Fourth Era. Emelia. Emelia had spent her morning trying to catch up on her alteration studies. These past days had illustrated her lack in this area to an uncomfortable degree. While her natural talent for restoration spell work and healing had driven her through a novitiate and apprenticeship with precocious speed, her lack of progress in the other schools of magic was starting to become more apparent. She needed to work. It would be good for her mind, and it was, after all, necessary for her education. She was not yet ready to return to college grounds, especially not without Eamon or Kaidan to go with her. That was a mountain she would have to climb on another day, but she didn't have to stand in the Hall of Elements to practice spell work, and she didn't have to sit in the Arcanium to study books. Kaidan had come up to join her for breakfast, but spent the rest of the morning preparing for his journey. He'd left for Windhelm on horseback after the midday meal, and despite being grateful for his willingness to go, it was the first time they'd ever had to separate. Emelia felt very alone and exposed as she watched him ride away from Greywatch House. Their intense new relationship had been formed in the middle of a crisis, and it had struck her more than once that they didn't even truly know each other. Know him or not, she still felt the loss of his presence more keenly than she liked. Gregor, who'd been hovering since her return on Fredas, encouraged her to go back inside the house and stay warm. She did that. Emelia decided her best hope for getting anything productive done during what remained of this day would be to sit down with a few books and go back to the basics. She went to the shelves in Eamon's study and ran her fingers over the familiar spines of Eamon's collection. So many of his books were about botany, alchemy, and herbal medicine. He really was an indefatigable lover of plants. She found the section she was looking for, which was a set of 2 shelves dedicated to books at the apprentice level. She was dismayed by the layer of dust on these volumes, a shameful testament to her lack of discipline as a student. She pulled out 2 books specifically addressing alteration work. The first was entitled The Words of Fundament, a very old volume written by some long-dead master of the alteration arts. The second title was called Let There Be Light, and she tried not to feel insulted by this brightly bound yellow book that upon closer inspection was a reprint in the common tongue of a book originally written for Altmer children. She set the larger volume to the side on Eamon's desk and carefully wiped the dust from the whimsically decorated smaller book about light spells. It was older than it looked, the fine dyed leather showing signs of cracking in some of the creases, but the color was still vibrant, and the gold-embossed images of shining stars around a glowing orb in the center still twinkled in a raking light. Opening the front cover, she was delighted to find a folded piece of paper tucked within, and on the inside end paper, a child's bold signature. Andrina Greywatch, it read. And then down at the bottom of the same sheet, a more elegant hand had written, For my beloved sister, on her 9th birthday, 13th of sun's dawn, 4E36. 9th birthday indeed, Emelia said to herself, pausing only briefly to consider the date he'd written on that page, and how very long ago that seemed to her. Eamon didn't believe in letting things become problems before they were dealt with, and so they had addressed and discussed and processed what they both felt about their monumental age difference a long time ago. Well, it was a long time for her, at least. She rarely thought of it anymore. Like so many things between them, it had been easily put away in its proper place, ordered and labeled, and no longer important. Turning her attention back to the book's contents, she flipped through the pages that laid out the forms and methods for spells that produce light, all fully illustrated with fine line drawings and simple language for young readers. She rolled her eyes a little, but then chastised herself. "Humility and modesty are virtues of glory for a lady, Emelia." It was true. She was absolutely rubbish at even basic alteration spellwork. She was not too good to use a book written for children. At this point, she needed all the help she could get. Emelia gently unfolded the paper that had been tucked inside the book's cover and gasped in surprise. She'd expected a letter or a paper covered with study notes, but here was a drawing done in charcoals depicting a much younger Eamon, sitting in a chair, that very chair there, in fact, here in this room. He was studying a book that lay open and balanced on one knee, leaning back and filling the chair with that top leg casually crossed over the other. He had a sly, satisfied half-smile on his face that she'd seen him wearing whenever something amused him. The artist had caught the expression perfectly. Eamon's hair was longer here and darker, and his face had not yet earned any lines around his eyes and forehead to give him the look of gravity and determination that so characterized his appearance now. Still, to see his likeness so expertly rendered after missing him so terribly during this week that felt so much longer, made her stomach squeeze and her throat catch. Emelia looked closely over the drawing's edges to see if there was a signature from the artist, and she found one in the bottom right corner. Cleverly worked into the arm of the chair were the initials A.G. Andrina must have drawn this picture of her brother, right here in what was then their father's study, and then simply tucked it away in this book, as though it were not a brilliant portrait worthy of notice or further comment. She carefully turned it over to look at the back side of the paper, but there was no date or writing of any kind there. She replaced the drawing in the same place where it had been preserved for all of these years and went in search of the housekeeper. "Hilda," Emelia called, "you won't believe what I just found." When she found Hilda, however, the housekeeper was busy at the front door, greeting the regal alt-merry woman who Eamon thought of as a surrogate sister, and whom all of her students referred to as the Red Queen. "Master Feralda," Emelia blurted. "My goodness, Lady Emelia, I think we can dispense with the titles today, don't you? We aren't on college grounds, and I've spent the entire week in fear for your life, dearest." She turned to the housekeeper then, who was taking Feralda's cloak and directing Gregor to the large trunk and valise now stacked in the entryway. "Thank you, Hilda," Feralda said. "Just put all of this in my usual room. I'm not sure how long I'll be staying, but I suspect it will be at least 2 weeks. Your employers have kicked quite the hornet's nest this time." Hilda wisely betrayed no reaction to this woman's criticism of her charges and said, "You are always welcome at Greywatch House, Master Feralda, but we have another guest set up in the blue room. Would you prefer the sage room or the rose room?" Feralda wrinkled her perfect nose at this and said, "Is your guest a man or a woman? I would never displace a lady from her lodgings, you understand, but I consider the blue room quite my own, you know, and after all, a man never really cares which bed he sleeps in, does he?" Hilda smiled and winked. "Very well, ma'am. I'll move his things to the sage room. He's a good lad, and I don't think he'll mind." "I'll be very surprised if he even notices," Feralda said. "Men rarely notice anything if it isn't trying to kill them or get them out of their trousers." She straightened her cuffs and began smoothing her skirts before she seemed to notice with a start that Gregor was about to move her trunk. "Oh, don't bother with that. My good man, I've brought reinforcements. Gracious, you didn't think I carried that all the way down here myself, did you?" 2 young men wearing college novitiate robes emerged through the front door at this moment, carrying another trunk similar to the first one. "Hilda," Feralda said, "won't you show these lads where to put all of these things? I need to speak with this one." And then she waved a hand languidly in Emelia's direction. Emelia bit her lip to keep from smiling at Feralda's flamboyant display. She had never been so glad to see this woman in all of her life. She was about to say so when Feralda beat her to it. "I'm sure you're happy to see me, Emelia, so why on earth didn't you call for me yesterday morning as soon as you recovered from travel?" "How did you even know I was here yesterday?" Feralda looked offended at this. "Of course I knew you were here yesterday. I knew less than an hour after you arrived on Fredas evening. I know everything, Emelia, especially when it involves the doings of people I love. How you haven't learned this yet is beyond my ability to comprehend." "It wasn't meant as a slight, Feralda. We were just exhausted." "We?" she said. "I assume we includes the man whose belongings are currently cluttering up my room?" "Yes," Emelia replied. "Well," Feralda said, "since you didn't send for me, I decided to take matters into my own hands before Colette gets wind of your return and comes down here in all of her glory to assert dominance." She paused here dramatically before saying, "We have news." After the bustle of her arrival had settled, and the novices had taken the college cart back to the school's stables, Feralda and Emelia settled in the drawing room with tea and a tray of fruit and cheese to nibble. Feralda's sharp eyes took in every fidget and expression Emelia made. For all of her outward boldness, Feralda was one of the most observant and sensitive people Emelia had ever met. The woman missed nothing. Ever. "You said you had news," Emelia prodded. Feralda, however, was not to be dissuaded. "Yes, I do. But you have news as well, my dear, and I believe that yours is far more pressing." At this, she leaned over and held out her hand to Emelia, offering without taking. Emelia placed her hand in Feralda's, and when the older woman's fingers closed around her own in a comforting squeeze, the floodgates of Emelia's suffering and sorrow opened wide. The picturesque elven woman, so elegant and correct in every move she ever made, left her chair and knelt on the floor in front of Emelia, pulling the younger woman into a tight embrace. "You are all right, Parapinha. I promise you that all will be well." Emelia sobbed, and Feralda simply rocked her, stroking her hair just as her mother had done when Emelia was a little girl. When her tears slowed to a manageable trickle, Feralda leaned back and produced a beautiful linen handkerchief from one of the many invisible pockets in her scarlet robes. Rising and resuming her seat, the Red Queen's mask of authority settled back over her posture, and she said, "I thought it might be something like that." "Something like what?" Emelia asked in confusion. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to," Feralda replied. "But you can, if you think it will help. I know that it can be easier to discuss these things with another woman, and you seem to be living among more men than is strictly good for you at present. I will stay until that is no longer an obstacle to your comfort." "What about your work? Won't Archmage Aran be upset?" Feralda chuckled. "Savos can't find his own backside with both hands in a mage light without Mirabelle's help. She is the only one I needed to speak with. Sergius agreed to assist me with all of the political correspondence I'm responsible for, and I have 2 mastery students teaching my classes for me until I choose to return." Emelia looked stunned. "Master Sergius agreed to help someone?" The college's enchanting master was a surly man, brusque with everyone, and not the sort she could imagine doing favors out of the kindness of his heart. Feralda lifted one sharply sculpted eyebrow and said, "He is a man of many hidden qualities." Emelia's eyes widened. "Master Sergius? Really?" Feralda ignored this and said, "Besides, it's not as though I've left the province. I'm less than 2 miles away, and they all know where to find me if I'm needed. You and Eamon are my priority right now." Emelia smiled at this. "I appreciate it, Feralda, and I am very glad you've come." Of course you are, Feralda said. Honestly, Emelia, I worry about you down here with nobody save 2 elderly men to keep you company. Eamon isn't elderly, Feralda, and I have Hilda. Hilda is only in this house for a few hours per day to make meals and balance the household books. She is not enough to keep you socialized. You live with one emotionally constipated Altmer, who wants to make you the mother of his children, but cannot summon the testicular fortitude necessary to ask you for marriage, and with one octogenarian Nord, who treats you as his grandchild. And when you finally decide to bring another person into your circle, it's another man. What were you thinking? Emelia wasn't sure how to respond to this little speech, so she raised her own impressive eyebrow into an arch and sipped her tea. Feralda grinned and said, "Good. There is my friend again. I see you in there, Lady Emelia Ashcroft. Well done." "I don't think I can talk about it yet," Emelia said. "Someday, perhaps, but not yet." "Fair enough, and I will not ask you questions about it. But with your permission, I will explain things to Colette. You need to be examined and cared for. You understand that, don't you?" Emelia did not object, so Feralda continued. "And I assume you would rather have that done by Colette than Eamon, who will absolutely insist that none but he could possibly be trusted with the examination if it hasn't already been done before he returns home. You understand that as well, do you not?" "I had not thought of that," Emelia said. "You are right, of course. Yes, it must be Colette, and it must be done before Eamon gets home. I cannot bear the thought of any of this happening with him in the house." "I agree that would be for the best," Feralda said. "Would you like to see her here or in her rooms at the college?" Here, I think. I feel safe here." Feralda nodded. "And do you want me to be present, or would you be more comfortable if no one but Colette attended you?" "I will want both of you with me, but she must see me in my room downstairs. I will not lay myself out on the dining room table like one of Eamon's patients." "Leave it with me, then," Feralda said. "I will go and fetch Colette. We will all have the evening meal together, and then she can do whatever needs doing after I send Gregor and Hilda home for the night." "Thank you, Feralda." "For what, dear?" "For being my friend, I suppose, and for being you."